A woman is sitting on the street when a man approaches her. He takes the money she got and rips it to pieces. The woman tries to ask him not to, but he won't listen. She doesn't understand why he did this. The man asks her what she thinks about making a lot more money than she makes there. She's surprised by the amount and says she wants it, but asks if this is some kind of joke. Scott says no, she just needs to do one thing for him. She asks what that thing is, without even looking at him, delighted with the money. Scott pulls out his cell phone and takes pictures of her as she tries to hide. He asks her to get her things soon and get in the car with him, quickly. She starts to get up, but he's impatient and urges her to walk with him to the car. Haley takes all her stuff and gets in the car with him. Haley is out of the rags she was wearing, and is now clean and in other clothes. Scott thanks the person who took care of her and dismisses. Scott says her job will be to ruin a man's life. Haley doesn't understand, so Scott explains that they're going to a fundraiser and he wants her to go after a businessman named Charles. She asks who that is, but he replies that doesn't matter. What he needs is for her to kiss Charles, but kiss him in a way that everyone thinks they're lovers. He'll take some pictures of them kissing, and then she'll get the money. She asks what Scott gets out of it. He replies that he wants to end Charles' career, but that doesn't interest her. This will be the easiest money she's ever made in her life. She can't refuse. Haley wants to know why she can't refuse, but he says he knows where she came from. Haley starts to say that she's not that kind of woman, but he cuts her off, asking her to be silent. He hands her a ring, saying it's a family jewel and she can have it. He'll be waiting for her outside, and leaves. Haley is satisfied with the jewelry. They're at a bar having something to eat, but Haley is starving, acting rude. Scott asks her to stop doing this. He's acting like an animal. Haley takes a bag and puts food in it. Scott tells her she's uneducated, but she quickly hides the bag inside her clothes. She finishes the drink by tipping the glass, and he tells her she needs to be more polite, drinking with only one hand. He resolves to put that aside and revise the plan. He says that when Mr. Charles arrives, he wants Haley to find an excuse to go up to him and kiss him. He'll observe from afar and take a picture of them. It was clear? With her mouth full of food, she says yes. He realizes they're about to start the speech and calls her to join him. The presenter says it's time to welcome Mr. Charles. Everyone applauds. Haley just watches. Charles goes to the front and greets the presenter. Charles begins by saying that he has great news to share. Thanks to the donations of everyone there, they have already managed to raise enough money for help people. Everyone is happy with the news. Charles says that with all this money collected, they'll be able to buy food, clothes, and medicine for those who cannot afford it. But as everyone there knows, there are still many people living on the street, and he knows that everyone there can do a little more. They just have to believe in kindness. He's certain that he's surrounded by good people who will collaborate so that they can help as many people as possible. He ends the speech by saying that he'll see them again at the awards ceremony, and looks forward to seeing them later. Toast and say goodbye. Haley tries to leave, but Scott wants to know where she's going. She asks if Scott just heard what Charles said. How could she have the nerve to harm a kind man like that? She says she can't go through with this. Scott says she can go then, but first she'll have to return all the money he paid her, plus what he spent on clothes, hair and makeup. He was already forgetting about his family jewel. Did he lose? Or was it stolen? He doesn't want her to go through any embarrassing situations with the police. She probably doesn't want to either, so what's left for them to do is stick with the plan. Haley agrees to continue, in the face of Scott's threats, but she doesn't want to. She passes walking in front of Charles, and drops an accessory. He notices this and calls out to her, to give her back. She takes the object back and thanks him. He says his name is Charles, and asks her name. Haley responds. Charles asks what a beautiful woman like her does of her life, but Haley gets nervous and doesn't know what to answer. She stutters for a while, thinking of what to say, and ends up saying that she's looking for a job. Charles is surprised that she's unemployed and yet she's there at the party helping to support the homeless. She says that whenever she's out on the street she shares with people what she has. Charles finds this admirable, says he does the same as her. Whenever he can, he's helping people. She says she always thought rich people didn't have time to help people living on the streets. Charles says no, he's not like that. For her to have an idea, this foundation is the biggest project of his life. and the goal is to help as many people who are homeless, people who need help. Nothing enchants him more in life than helping others, being able to help those who need it most. Haley says he's an admirable person, and she wishes more people thought like him. She notices something. It's Scott rushing her while Charles continues talking without noticing anything. She gets irritated, and Charles thinks it's about him. She pretends that something got in his eye, and when he approaches, Haley kisses him. Scott approaches them, calling out to Charles and asking if he isn't ashamed of taking advantage of the people he claims to help. He asks what Scott is talking about. He shows a picture and tells Charles to take a look. Scott says he'll send these pictures to the gossip magazines. Imagine the headlines they'll put on the story. Charles kissing a woman who lives down the street. Scott says that Charles had better step down as CEO of the company and put him in charge, otherwise he already knows what will happen. Charles says it's nothing. He doesn't mind kissing Haley, she's a person like any other. It doesn't matter to him where she comes from, what she does, or what she is. Scott says Charles doesn't understand, but he says it's Scott who doesn't understand. Charles had always understood that he wanted to be president of the company, he always had. They're interrupted by the presenter, who calls Charles again to introduce the sponsors. He says they will finish the conversation after the awards. Haley goes after him, but Scott stops her, saying that she won't. Haley says that she's fulfilled her part of the deal, now she's leaving. Scott says he's paying her, so he tells her when she can leave. Now they have a new deal, and he asks her to accompany him. Charles returns to the front and thanks all the guests for coming. He says that before he hands out the evening's grand prize, he'd like to do something, but he's interrupted by Scott, who says he has a few things to say to the guests. He takes the microphone and says that everyone knows how honorable and what a good person Charles is. And thanks to him, and everyone present, this event was possible. Then he asks the guests to applaud Charles. He says that he would like everyone to see a photo, which he will now forward to their cell phones, and so he does. Everyone receives the photos and is amazed. Scott says that's what they're seeing. Charles says he helps people who live on the street, but he really just wants to use them, and says the police can arrest him. He goes on to say that maybe some of them don't believe what he says, but he has the proof. The testimony of a woman who went through this exact situation. She was helped, but the only purpose of the help was to be able to take advantage of her. He calls Haley. He says if she sticks to the deal, she'll be a rich woman. Haley takes the mic and goes in front of everyone. She says her name is Haley, and it's true. A rich man tried to take advantage of her. He took her off the street and offered her a lot of money. After that, he humiliated her, manipulated her, and all that just because he has a lot of money. But she doesn't think that's justification for taking advantage of people. She says his name is Scott. She says that the only thing Scott wanted was to slander Mr. Charles. Scott takes the mic out of her hand and says it's all a lie. Haley returns all the money he paid her and says she doesn't want this anymore. Scott says to believe him, they already know him, not this damn street person. A policeman takes him away. Charles thanks Haley for what she did. He apologizes for what the guests just witnessed. He says to thank Scott as well, for the donation he will make with the severance money he will have to pay to the foundation. Charles thanks Haley for saving him. She says he doesn't need to thank her, she was also to blame. She shouldn't have accepted Scott's proposal. If she hadn't, none of this would have happened. Charles says that if it wasn't her, it would have been another girl, so he thanks for her honesty. He just has the impression that he has already seen her somewhere. She explains that she has already been helped by his foundation, only she didn't know that it was his, so he must have seen her from afar. Charles says Haley should be in his place. She doesn't understand. He explains that he's had a lifetime of privilege. He's never lived on the streets, so he doesn't know what it's like. He has a proposal to make to her. He asks her how she feels about being the foundation's new manager. Haley thinks he's messing with her, but he says it's real. He realizes that she has a deeper insight into homelessness, and asks if she's willing to change people's lives as hers has been changed. She says yes, of course. Charles thinks it's excellent and welcomes her as the new manager. Haley thanks him so much.